Hi everyone, Pam Gregory. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of October and the new moon that we have in Libra on the 1st. But there's quite a shift starting to happen this month, which is from a lot of the mutability that we've seen through the rest of this year into more of a focus on cardinal signs. That's partly Jupiter moving into Libra. Now, mutability is where we had a lot of fast-moving change from one side to the other. We had to be fast on our feet. Things were often confusing. And this came to a peak in June. So if you live in the UK, you remember the Brexit campaign, and there was a lot of confusion and fast-moving change happening there. So that's mutability. But we're now moving back to cardinality in a bigger way, and that is about action. Now, what's interesting about this month is Jupiter, in its move into Libra, is starting to highlight the Uranus-Pluto square, or resurrect the Uranus-Pluto square that I've talked so much about over the last 4 or 5 years. Because in October, by the 12th of October, it's starting to make a wide square to Pluto, and I'll talk about what that means in a moment. And then by November, Jupiter is starting to oppose Uranus. So it's forming a T-square. It's pulling Pluto and Uranus back into a T-square. So it'll resurrect some of those themes that we've talked about, and I'll remind you of those in a moment. So just taking it step by step, Jupiter is in Libra until October 2017. That is very good news for anyone who has the Sun, Moon, Ascendant, or any emphasis in Libra. And it will tend to emphasize relationships of all kinds, not just romantic relationships, but mutual growth coming from relationships, collaboration coming from relationships. And it's very much about fairness and justice. And watch for those words coming up a lot in the media. What's fair and what's just and what's right. Now, it's in the early degrees of Libra. In the first half of October, it runs from about 4 to 8 degrees of Libra, so see where that is in your chart. And it starts to make a wide square to Pluto in Capricorn at 14 degrees. Now, a square between Jupiter and Pluto is about success. It's about wealth and recognition, opportunity. So if you see where those early degrees of Libra fall in your birth chart, that is going to be an area which could really see some significant success for you. Opportunities coming in, money coming in, linked to that area of life. And in fact, really the whole of Libra, the sign of Libra in your chart, just watch that, because that's going to be an area potentially of expansion over the next year. So this is an aspect of wealth, really, and success, this square between Jupiter and Pluto. But let's also remind ourselves of the themes between Uranus and Pluto, because that's going to be what's going to be highlighted over the next 6 months until April. 7 months, really. Pluto is about power, and it's also about control. It's about governments, particularly autocratic governments which have top-down control. It's about big corporations. It's about big pharma. It's about where there's a degree of control over people. Uranus is the antithesis of that. It's the maverick. It always challenges the status quo. It's about freedom and independence, and what about the rights of the individual? So we saw this aspect. I've written about a whole chapter about this in my book. We saw this in the 1960s when there were protests about civil rights and black power and women's lib, and many laws were changed at that time to reflect greater equality as a result of those protests. More recently, with Uranus-Pluto, which really started in April 2011, we had the Arab Spring, when in many cases, in just a few days, very established, almost fossilized autocratic governments were torn down by the protests of the people. And we've seen movements like the Occupy movement over the last few years too. It's that surge of demanding equality from the populace, if you like. So that's going to be coming up again, and it's really emphasized in as well, because Jupiter is now in Libra, which is about equality, fairness, justice. Another aspect of this T-square between Jupiter, Uranus and Pluto is historically, if we go way back in history, and again I've tracked some of this in my book, that's a kind of eureka combination. Those three planets together, they form a kind of breakthrough, a scientific breakthrough, often to a greater or higher understanding of our reality. For instance, when Columbus discovered the Earth wasn't flat, when we put the first man on the moon in July 1969, we had a conjunction between Jupiter, Uranus and Pluto. So it breaks us through to a bigger reality. So over the next few months until April particularly, and also because Saturn is in Sagittarius and that can be connected to space travel, I think we could well see more evidence of other galaxies, other planetary systems beyond the Milky Way, more evidence of life beyond our own solar system. I anticipate that's how it could well work, which is incredibly exciting and will really expand our vision of who we are here on Earth. So very exciting. But coming back to the themes that are really being set up now as we move towards the next big year, which is going to be 2020. All of this year we've had the Saturn-Neptune square running. And as I've said many times, this is about is it true? Is it not? Can we trust it? Can we not? Is it real? Is it not? And we've seen that in many ways amongst our leaders, amongst governments. I'm thinking of the US presidential election, where those issues have been writ large, I think. But also, because we've had that all of this year, and now the Uranus-Pluto square is coming up again, it's a kind of perhaps distrust of government or question around big corporations and the degree of control they have. So initially through October we might see, because of the Jupiter-Pluto aspect, we might see this demand for equal rights coming up. Once Uranus comes into that aspect in November, it's going to be about individual freedom. I think that's going to come into the language of the media much more. We also have, in the early days of October, a square between Jupiter and Mars. Mars is in Capricorn, the early degrees of Capricorn, and this Jupiter square Mars aspect is about fighting for causes, fighting again for equal rights. And we may even see laws being debated around equal rights. On a personal level, this is terrific for getting projects organised and completed. Mars in Capricorn is very good at that, and Jupiter really helps to move that along. So that's a great combination for getting big projects underway. Then on the 1st of October, this happens at 1:11 a.m. UK time. We have the new moon at 8:15 of Libra. If you live in the US, you're going to have that new moon the day before at 5:11 p.m. Pacific time on the 30th of September. So a new moon is always a new beginning, and this is a lovely new moon because the sun and the moon, which are always together at a new moon, are conjunct Jupiter. So this is an expansive new moon, and it's very much about personal growth, and it's also about personal growth via relationships. So it's really lovely. So again, relationships are being very emphasized at this new moon. So see where 8 degrees of Libra falls for you, because that is going to be an area of new beginning, but as I say, expansion too. So Pluto will also be squaring the sun and moon at this new moon. So again, we pick up that same theme I've just been talking about of this issue around control versus fairness and justice. So that really sets it up in a big way as we run towards 2020. I think it's going to be very interesting because, I'll be talking a lot about 2020 as we move through the next 4 years, but there's a huge lineup of planets in Capricorn. Capricorn as a sign is also about control, government, big corporations, etc. And I think we may reach a peak of almost polarization between those people who are content to go along with that and the Uranus side, those people who really want to challenge that. And what's very interesting is by the end of 2020, in December 2020, we have Jupiter and Saturn, which are very linked with the way society is structured, moving into Aquarius. And Aquarius is the sign of the collective. So what I think we may have by then is much more of a horizontal structure to our society rather than a vertical structure. We're going to be much more equal, or there's going to be an urge for equality that is really going to start to manifest then. People living in communities is how I anticipate that. On a personal level, Libra is ruled by Venus, so this is beauty. It's love and it's beauty. And we've got a beautiful trine between Neptune and Venus at this new moon. So that's about creativity. It's about a very fine perception. And Neptune is the higher octave of Venus in terms of unconditional love. So it's really quite beautiful. So really try and tune in, whether you're being creative, whether you're meditating, whether you're just tuning into nature. Really use that beautiful aspect between Neptune and Venus. Neptune also aspects the sun and moon at this new moon. So again, this feeling of unconditional love, of living from the heart. It's a feeling of idealism. And because the sun and moon are in Libra, it's idealism in relationships. How can we be the best that we can be in every relationship? How can we live from the heart? And I think we will start to think about relating to each other from spiritual principles. You know, the highest we can be, the highest expression of us. So there's some really beautiful things that are being set up at this new moon. And I think after the massive eclipses we had in September, where many people went through a lot of personal changes, people feel often very low energy, very wiped out at the eclipses because the light and energy to the earth is interrupted, it becomes recalibrated. So it's wonderful to have this fresh energy of the new moon coming in, particularly when the sun and moon are conjunct Jupiter. And it's interesting also that lunar eclipse in Pisces on the 16th of September, that was a south node eclipse. So the south node, the moon was conjunct the south node, so that was really emphasizing that we are leaving the past behind. And we have Saturn, transiting Saturn square to the nodal axis at this new moon. And that's a very clear and conscious decision to leave the past behind. Transiting Neptune is conjunct the south node, 10 to 12 degrees of Pisces. So again, there's that feeling of just whatever the disappointments, whatever the disillusionments, leave the past behind and just be a new, fresh, energetic being moving forwards from this point on in a much higher state of being as we move towards 2020. So there's some real inspiration coming in here at this new moon. So see where this falls in your chart. If you don't know where 8 degrees of Libra falls in your chart, or in fact any of the aspects I've mentioned, you can go to my website pamgregory.com or thenextstep.uk.com, and you can now download a free birth chart. If you check out the link appearing above me here or below in the description, you can also go to my store and buy 2-part tutorial videos which will explain everything you need to know about where any aspect falls for you in your birth chart and exactly what it means for you in your life. And you can use those for eternity. Any aspect that I ever talk about in the future, you can go back to those tutorials and see what it means for you. So if you'd like more information about my book, my free monthly newsletter of several thousand words, my audiobook, my tutorial videos, just check out that website, pamgregory.com or thenextstep.uk.com. And thank you for listening, and have a wonderful new moon, new beginning in Libra on the 1st.